This ride last night was a shock, and I'm still trying to process it. So Dramer and I, we don't ride. I've probably been on a horse's back 12 times in the last 5 years. We also don't do just about anything that most people would consider training or work. We haven't been in an arena or tried to ride in anything like an arena for such a long time. And when we did, unless it was in the very old days when I used to use a whip and a bit, drive and restrain, it was still extremely difficult to get tolt in an arena. And tolt requires a lot of carrying capacity. So it is a more collected gait than a trot. So the horse has to be self-carrying to be able to tolt. Unless the horse is what we would call a, quote, natural tolter, which is a horse that actually will prefer to take tolt on his own. Dramer is not one of those horses. In fact, we didn't see tolt for many years. Dramer, of course, has complete autonomy, which means he has right of consent. He can say no. He knows he can say no at any time. And that if he says no, he's going to say no, and we're done. And that means you have to get off and put him back on the pasture. Although in this case, the paddock has grass in it that he can eat and hay in one corner. But what astonished me about these two rides, and especially the second one, the one that I'm showing mostly in this video, it wasn't that he had maintained his abilities with so little work for so many years. It's that what he did last night was better than anything he has ever done for me in 10 years. In fact, it's better than he's ever done for anyone, including professional trainers, unless they had a whip and a bit and they did drive and restrain. So for him to be just doing this and offering this, I know how this works. And it was still a huge surprise. Because, of course, he doesn't need to do that. And I wasn't, stopping and rewarding him for every big moment. In fact, on both of those nights, I think I only stopped him and rewarded him twice during the rides. The big trot was very surprising, even though he has done that lots of times, certainly does it a lot on the ground. And then even when he would, last night, fall back to sort of a less fancy big trot, it was still nowhere near his normal default downhill, shuffling, short stride trot, which is his normal trot. So what do I think was really happening? Why did he do that? Again, I don't know, but my guess, he was making the best use of nature's pharmacy. The neurotransmitters, the hormones that we get from what you think of as the fight or flight system, it includes all of the performance-enhancing chemicals. So adrenaline, noradrenalin, the anti-inflammatories, cortisol, the natural painkillers, the opioids, the endorphins, the anandamides, right? Nature's cannabis. Of course, dopamine, osteocalcin, all these things that contribute in real time to making the activity not just much easier, but because they're putting in so much effort, because it's so difficult, it actually makes it feel much better, happier, fun even, compared to doing less effortful work. If you're not familiar with the science of intrinsic motivation in work like this, or flow state research, or this research of effortless attention, then it can be hard to understand how something can be harder and get a lot easier. If the horse is scared into it or forced into it, which is typically how horses are trained and how he once was trained too, You get some of the benefits, of course, but through a threat. And that threat doesn't give you all of the other good chemicals. It gives you the performance enhancers, but it comes at a very high price tag. And of course, you end up with the horse then being in protection mode. So that's why you can get some really high effort work by bringing up that fight or flight system, using the whip, getting the horse super responsive and a little bit afraid to, make a mistake and not respond. But when you do that, since the nervous system goes into a protection mode, that's when you're also going to get bracing, stiffness, possibly explosiveness, resistance to movement. Like they'll do the movement, but it won't be these big fluid through movements. So we want all of the benefits in their ability to perform and feel good, but without the downsides. So for that, it has to be completely voluntary. So it has to be a high challenge that they are willingly taking on, but without any threat whatsoever. And so that's what was happening. But he still didn't have to do that. So why did he go even bigger every year when I'm getting ready to ride him again, even though I never really end up doing it? I start by letting the horses get some of their nature's pharmacy back, their motivation to move, and I do it with speed play. I use my reverse triangle, and then I start putting the saddle on and letting them run and buck and start, feeling really good about moving again. And that gets them ready to be able to do more work because now they've, reawakened their intrinsic motivation to move. And that fun exercise, because it's fast, has, of course, had a training effect. So now they actually are fitter. It is easier for them to do certain things. Have they gotten stronger? A little bit. They've certainly improved their fitness capacity. Their strength, they do get when they, for example, stop, spin, turn around, and explode off in the other direction. Then they're certainly drawing on strength. And then I put weights on their back, and then finally the rider. But this time I couldn't use my normal speed play because I'm keeping them off of the grass. So I thought, well, okay, if I can't use speed as the stress, because you can't get to any of the good stuff without physical stress, if I can't stress them with speed play, then really the only thing I have for physical stress that will bring up nature's pharmacy is going to be adding load to their back. Now, you could also do this with the horse that's pulling, a cart or a carriage, and you could keep loading that up. So I thought, well, the only way I'm going to be able to do it then is with adding load much sooner than I would have. It was like, no, this season we're going to start in the weight room. We're going to start with strength training. So I started putting the weights on almost immediately. And then I got a new type of water bag. This one's called HydroCore. And I would put that on him with the surcingle. And then I started getting on so that now he had an even bigger load. But all I would do is ask him to do a few crunches, and that was it. Just a few crunches, and then as long as I was checking to see, can he lift his back? Can he push against my weight that's pushing his spine into extension, which I will never, ever, ever ride that, which is why the basic thing I always would teach any horse that's ever going to be ridden is to do the can you flex your back against the rider? And can you do it automatically? Can you sustain it? And then can you start to do it in other gaits? So I would ask him to do that. And if he could do that, we would do maybe 3, 4, 5 crunches, and I would get off. That was it. Then I took him out, and I was a little bit afraid to ride him out because I knew that he would want to go fast. Again, this is an energy saver. But once they understand how nature's pharmacy works, if they want to do it, then they will willingly go big, really big, big enough or fast enough, whatever it takes, for them to get that kick that they need, those performance-enhancing feel-good drugs, to try to cope with that added stress. Now, again, remember when I say cope with the added stress, he has autonomy. He's very mature in this. He knows that there are no consequences to him just saying, nope. So he's already accepted the challenge, but since he's accepted the challenge, he wants the good drugs, which he knows how to access because he's done it. So the plan was, make the arena. It might take 2 weeks, maybe at the most 3 weeks, to get him more fitness capacity for carrying a rider so that he doesn't have to bring up all of nature's pharmacy, that it's easier for him. And then I would work on defaults, temporary defaults, so that it would be easier for him that when a person gets on or when I get on, it'd be like, oh yeah, this is what we do. It's no big deal. So we got in that arena. He, of course, immediately triggered nature's pharmacy for himself because he wanted to. And this was the result. And I think using strength instead of speed was the biggest change and the biggest contributor. There are differences in the physiological result of high effort, real strength training. And I mean like going to the gym, which means things that he cannot do very many repetitions of. Because again, if they can consistently do something after 10 or 20 repetitions of that, 10, 20 strides of that, they're not getting any more strengthening after that. They can already do it. After that, they're just getting more endurance. So you're not going to get the same kind of benefits. You get benefits, but not the same kind of benefits. There are things that are triggered by intense strength stress that you can kind of think of it this way. It's like it sends a signal to the body, humans too, that says you're growing again, like a younger person. So the body and the nervous system brings together the resources that it needs, of course, to remodel, to adapt to the actual tissue stress, but also things that are going on in the brain. Things that affect metabolism even when they're not exercising. Things that affect their mood, their psychology, their motivation. All of these things are possible because I was using strength training, in real strength training. Again, not lots of hill work or things that we typically think of as strength, but I mean really hard exercises that he can't do very many of, and they put a great deal of stress on the body in different ways. Of course, there's ways to do this very safely, but this is a big reason why I absolutely would never do this with a horse that didn't have autonomy. Because when you put that kind of stress on a horse, or you micro-shape the movements, which is you are putting the stress on the horse and telling him exactly how to cope with it, how he's allowed to move his body, that's when you're potentially going to get the opposite effect, where the horse is actually going to go into protection mode. His nervous system will adapt to some movements, but with a lot of compensations, and they can get injured because they're going to tend to want to find the same safe solution and then repeat that over and over. So even if you're not doing a lot of work, if you're doing high stress work with a horse that doesn't have autonomy and you're shaping the movement, you're going to get repetitive stress. Putting this kind of stress on the body in this particular way, it's exactly how they become more robust. They build a very wide toolkit so that they can cope with just about anything. He did what he needed to do for himself, And I got this incredible gift. Riding a completely autonomous horse that has very robust movements. It's the greatest feeling in the world. I know people are skeptical. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people are skeptical that you can ride an autonomous horse. And now it's been many years, so lots of people are riding with this. If the horse agrees, and there's no guarantee he will, autonomy means they can say no. They have right of consent. But if the horse agrees, then not only can you ride an autonomous horse, but you can experience movements and willingness in a framework of intrinsic motivation and self-organization of movements. They haven't been micro-shaped. And they've been given a chance to have very challenging, effortful movements. You end up with movements that you would not have gotten from that horse any other way. No professional trainer was ever able to train Dramer to do some of these things he does now, just willingly on his own, because they're so far outside the scope of his natural movements. And yet, you have a choice. You can have a horse that's completely obedient, that does exactly what you want when you want it. Or you can have an autonomous horse, and you might not get what you want when you want it. But what you can get is something so far beyond what you were able to get with all the best tools in a horse that did not have autonomy. And you see people over and over and over again, especially with these Icelandic horses, where they are so dependent on the whip and potentially on the bit, where without drive and restrain, that even if they're riding bridleless, often they still have to hold the rope in front, but use the whip. So they have to drive the horse into the frame. And that becomes sort of a trap, that then you're stuck using the whip and drive and restrain, or using your legs, forever. And it can take a big leap of faith to say, what could happen if I just stopped using the whip? If I just stopped driving? And if I said, the only movements that I'm going to get are the ones the horse will offer himself and own. So if the horse needs reminders to engage the hind, then he doesn't own those movements. It means it's not part of his movement capability. His brain doesn't want to do it. Because if it did, you wouldn't have to remind him. It would just be what he's doing. And I don't mean that would be how he moves all the time. But I mean, when you're asking for a certain kind of movement, he either owns it and, oh yeah, this is how we do this movement, or he doesn't, and you have to keep reminding him. So when I see really well-trained horses, competition horses, or people with a lot of expertise, and they're still using the whip for reminders, and I'm not talking about using the whip for very subtle cues, because you can still cue the horse with a feather. Feather, you can get a long feather. It's as long as a dressage whip. And then you find out. And of course, I went through that experience when I was, deciding to stop with all of the drive and restrain and to go to all in on autonomy. There it is. I am not a good rider. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a professional. I'm just a long-time horse hobbyist owner like most of you. I already know that I've just had the best, most amazing, most magical ride of my entire life. And it might not look very impressive to most people, but for us, It was everything.